Nation, where we are busy putting death out of business. And wow, we got a great episode coming up here for you. It's Mr. Shumaker, who's everybody's favorite guy. We all love Mr. Shumaker. Welcome back, Mr. Shumaker. You're always doing there, sitting with the DC-9 as per normal. It's a beautiful plane, and I'm really it's an honor to have you back on. And thank you very much, Benzine 2020, for coming back on Detonation. Hope you're doing as well as well. I'll just do some quick housekeeping before we rock into this really, really cool episode on super longevity. And 2020 is shaping up to be a fantastic year for transhumanism. It's going to be the decade. The 2020s are going to be the decade of transhumanism. I think. I have a feeling that the foundations of a transhumanist future have been laid. And we as a community, we're starting to get the politics, we're starting to get the media, we've got the academics behind us, the academic theory, it's all starting to come together, and I think it's all culminating towards a terrific decade. Next decade, 2020s are going to be the decade of transhumanism, but it's also going to be a big year next year, and we're also getting momentum on the ground with all of these different all these different events as well. Super longevity events, Radfest, and so many others are steaming ahead. So the train is moving, the momentum is starting, the emergent age is happening, and we're going to take this whole movement forward into a bright, honest, amazing future. And I'm so excited for 2020. Now, some quick housekeeping. Yes, I did get kicked off Facebook. They want to verify my account. That's why I've disappeared. Not sure how long it takes Facebook to just, you send some ID in and they supposedly do some stuff where they verify your account. I don't know how long this is going to take. That's why the show is slowed to a crawl. I did get bogged down in work as well. I do work a regular job. This is my side campaign over here, but I want to make it more and more and more a normal thing to do, because I don't want to miss a moment of the action. So I have been bogged down at work anyway, which is why I've been absent. But it's just I don't know when they're going to fix it. And we did lose a lot of shows, and I apologize to everybody who we lost shows with. We lost, by my count, 5 or 6 shows in the immediate wake of that. And then now I'm just going to have to recover. But if you want to do a show, I know there's a lot of people out there who wanted to do shows. Come and find me on LinkedIn. I haven't really spruced it up very well, but you can come over to LinkedIn and we can organize shows and stuff from there. I'll have to become more active over there on LinkedIn, like any professional should be. I'm being lazy. I should do it. Hey, anyway, let's rock into the episode. Let's open. Mr. Shumaker, how are you? It's really good to see you here. You're looking great. As I said, DC-9's looking great as always. Hope you're doing well.
Thank you very much, Steele. Yes, doing quite well. And I share your excitement for the 2020s as they come upon us. From 2020 to 2030 is going to be a tremendous time in human history. And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling really grateful to be here for all of this. Plus, there's been a lot of really good things going on. We talked about Radfest, and we talked about Ocean Planet Conference. And then we're going to talk about yet another event that we all went to in super Southern California, to a super longevity event, but I won't get ahead on that. Anyway, it's just a really exciting time. Many great things going on, Steele.
Fantastic to hear. Thank you very much for coming on Detonation. Benzine 2020, thanks for joining us on the phone. How are you? How's your campaign going? It's good to catch up. It's good to update us, give us an update. Thanks for coming back on the show, Benzine 2020.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is good. And we are just a few weeks out from the decade of the 2020s. And I believe that will be a decade not only for futurists, but a decade for longeviticists, longevity advocates. And I feel it, and I think that the science bears this out, that we are looking in the course of this decade at effects to be reversing aging. Ray Kurzweil says that he believes as of 2020, he will be aging in reverse. And I think that the general population will share that experience just a few years beyond that. And I do believe that that's going to be happening in the 2020s. That was something that was discussed by presenters, including myself at this longevity seminar. We had a wonderful time there. It was also a nice holiday party. Got to catch up with a lot of wonderful friends, and I was really, really pleased to spend time with all of them, including Mr. Shumaker and Susan and all of our lovely friends. We really had a nice time there. I felt, and looking forward to discussing all of these things that will be happening in 2020 and in the coming years for futurists.
You know, reflecting on the decade that just happened, I mean, that was the biggest year. That was the biggest decade for transhumanism. When you think about it, this is only getting bigger and bigger and bigger with each passing decade. What used to be just Nick Bostrom scribbling some notes, in a journal is now turning into a presidential run by a couple of different candidates, be that Zoltan Itzvan, Benzion 2020, even arguably somebody like Andrew Yang, who's spouting a lot of the transhumanist points, at least at minimum, on an economic level. But, all the technologies are advancing as well. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of people are identifying subconsciously with transhumanism and they're identifying just below the surface. They agree fundamentally with a lot of the things that we talk about. They just don't have yet a name, a face to the name, a name to the face. And so it's kind of, I feel like if we just keep preaching, and as these Radfest events and as politicians like Zoltan Itzvan and Andrew Yang, as they start naming these things, we're seeing a cascade of people who are waking up and saying, hey, that's been me all the time. I agree with this stuff. Human beings, we're sick of aging. We're sick of degenerative health. We're sick of it, and we're tired of it because life is getting more and more exciting all the time. There's so much more to do, so much more to accomplish, so much more to learn. It's so fascinating, and there's more and more. And and we're getting sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I appreciate that. So let's rock into the event. Benzion, lead on the event. What happened with these events?
Yes, so this was a one-day seminar and also a holiday party that took place after. And we had some incredible presentations from some old friends and new. I was very pleased to get to see Ed Park and Johnny Adams, and also mainstays at Radfest and so many other longevity and futurism events. Of course, Max Moore and Natasha Vidamore did some presentations on their recent works. Our friends Bernie and Jim from People Unlimited did a wonderful presentation. The organizer of the event, Kat Cotter, and of course David Kekich as the MC. And Greg Fahey's presentation was incredible, really inspiring. I was also lucky enough, Kat was kind enough to let me present for a few minutes on the subject of a public health service that treats aging as a disease, and specifically the prospects for such a thing in Canada, and our new think tank, which has a mandate to work on such matters, to be advocating on behalf of the Canadian people for a public health service of this kind, one that better uses public funds for preventative measures and all of the good things that folks like Greg Fahey and Kat Cotter and David Kekich have spent so many years developing and advocating for. We want to see institutions that support this good work to a higher degree. And I do believe that Canada, it's a country with 38 million people. A great number of those are in the Greater Toronto area and Ontario, about half of them being in Ontario, and this concentration and this relatively small population, and the fact that they already have Medicare, as it's known there, their public health service is known as Medicare. This would allow for us to be advocating for these cost-saving measures in the form of greater use of data science, preventative measures, and all of the technologies advocated for by folks like Greg Fahey and Kat Cotter in the form of rejuvenative medicine and so forth. We are looking at a time where this is no longer science fiction, as it was some decades ago. This is now science fact. People can expect that we will be able to reverse aging in a cost-effective manner in the coming years. And that is an exciting prospect. And, you know, I'm reminded of another event. Aubrey de Grey, our friend, was not at this event, but I did get a chance to speak to him a little bit at recent events. And I'm reminded of what he said at the Foresight Institute weekend. He was talking with Alison Duetman, MC of that event. And he was describing these people who are victims of what is referred to, his term, as the deathist trance. They are not believers in the idea of longevity, but he had done a little bit more research and looked at these demographics and realized that these people were not really motivated by a lot of fear-based thinking or alarmist concerns. Their major problem really was that they had not had enough exposure to the idea of these kind of technologies and emerging biomedicine. And so every time that we are able to speak to people about this, every time that we are able to attend events and participate in events and create media that raises awareness for this, we are really doing that most vital work, because it would be a great tragedy if these emerging technologies were not used because of a lack of public interest or political will or a broad consensus. And that is up to us to see that level of awareness is created.
It's interesting. I just want to point out something kind of interesting. Do you know why the population of Canada is so concentrated along Toronto? It's not just because, they all happen to live there because it's a nice climate and stuff. It's actually that Canada, back in the day, in the 1800s or whatever, Canada and the United States were geopolitical rivals. And Canada actually put its population along its borders as a sort of defensive wall against the invasion from America. And then those cities sort of took on their own life because it was an internet-connected network of forts and rivers and garrisons and all that sort of stuff. And they're having real problems with that nowadays because they want to go north. They want to expand north up into that big wasteland up there that's being chewed up by either the United States, Russia, maybe even China. We'll have to have a look. But anyway, that's just some geopolitical nonsense that I couldn't help get out there. Mr. Shumaker, you have a lot to talk about in terms of these longevity events. Where would you like to open up? I know we've got some great names coming out. Ed Pax, I remember. Jody Adams, of course, fantastic guy. Greg Fahey, Kat Connor. These are all wonderful people. What about you? Let's talk about longevity, super longevity conferences. What news do you have to update us on?
Yeah, thanks, Steele. Well, yeah, exactly right. And the people that you named, the people that Ben named, that's the reason to go to these things. Of course, you know that I'm a big fan of RadFest and have gone the last 4 years and have already signed up to go to the 5th one. This is the second year going to this special event that Ben and I just went to in Southern California. So I guess the question would be, why keep going back? Well, part of it is that you said there is just so much to learn and there are so many interesting people to meet. There are so many people that need to be informed, and I would love to get them all to go to RadFest. I'd love to get them to go to all these other different conferences, but really, those of us who can go to these and then can find different venues to go out and speak and to present. There's a group here in the Phoenix area that I'm hosting each Monday night in an electronic format. And we go through and we talk about all this and we encourage each other to go to these events. But so that's an example. And then there are other venues and so forth where this information can come out, but you have to have that information. So something like RadFest gives you a huge, it's a multi-day event, usually 3 full days and then some. And then these smaller events, not only give you the information and, and even some of the same names, but now you're in a room of 50 to 100 people. And as Ben talked about, there's a holiday party that goes afterwards. And it might be real easy to just gloss over the idea of the holiday party and focus on the seminar, as great as the seminar was. But there's something about being able to go around and talk to these people one-on-one. I spent time talking to Johnny Adams a little bit about his antiagingmetrics.org. And what they're doing is they're developing good, reliable biomarkers for aging so that folks like myself that apply many of these things that I hear, we can have a yardstick and see realistically, what are we doing? Are we making improvements? Where are we going forward? That excites me. It excites me then to take that information and go talk to other people about these things. So we opened up talking about how great the 2020s are going to be. But it's good to be able to put numbers to that and say, in 2019, I was here, and in 2020, I was here, and in 2021, I was here, and these are the things that are going on. And we just had a lengthy discussion with Dr. Ed Park about telomerase induction, telomere length extension, and here's the latest things that he's doing. And then there are all different things that we bring to the table. I loved hearing Max's discussion, and he talked more about the practical side of cryonics, of which I'm a member, and some of the legal and things that you can do to improve yourself. There are just so many different avenues about life extension when you come to these things. And it's not just one particular thing. Now, Greg Fahey's talk is on thalamus regeneration, and this will be the third time I've heard him speak on that. One time I heard him speak very technically on it. One time was to a very large crowd, and it just by its very nature couldn't be in depth. So now when you have 50 to 100 radical life extension enthusiasts under the same roof, which we did here recently in California, he could give a talk that was relatable to an average person like myself, but with enough depth, with enough background for you to really get a feel for what's going on. And that's going to be something we're going to hear more and more about as we go through, because this is going now into double-blind human trials. And within a very few years, I anticipate, he's not going to guarantee this, but just based on what I've seen, I think we're going to see some really exciting things with thalamus regeneration, which, as many people know, is the foundation for your immune system. So when you have a good, healthy, strong immune system into your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, hundreds, wherever those numbers stop, this is an immense thing. And he's talking about something with ongoing results. So yeah, I am addicted to these things. I'm addicted to talking about these things, and I'm very anxious to see these things come to fruition. I'm also very excited about Ben talking about what's going on in Canada, Public Health Service, and I would love to see something like that for the US, because there's now things that are being developed so rapidly. We need some way to implement this efficiently in a big country like the United States. So I'm very grateful to Ben for what he's doing.
Yes, thank you, sir. And it is an incredible thing. And this think tank, we are already generating some content from our research fellows. This think tank is called the Research Institute for Future Endeavors, and RIFE for short. And we are going to be based. We are based in Vancouver, British Columbia, and it is a collaboration between the Canadian Transhumanist Party, the United States Transhumanist Party, and other futurist organizers from around the world. And we do have at the center of what we want to be doing this raising awareness for a life extension, as we alluded to already. This broad consensus for accepting and understanding this technology very much needs to be built. It's the biggest part of the recipe, so to speak, for this that is not being completed at this time. The good work of researchers, of whom there were many, at our longevity seminar. We should say of this event, it is a place for movers and shakers in this world. It's very true. It's all of the folks here were researchers and entrepreneurs, almost to a man or woman, a good mix of folks there. So this is an incredible place. And, I'd like to say, not just of that broad consensus generally, but on a personal note, it was not so long ago for myself that I was somebody who was blogging about this kind of thing and working with these kind of things more in other ways. And it was the ability to begin attending these events and having these conversations over hors d'oeuvres and meeting these people and shaking hands that has allowed me, insofar as I've been able to be starting to do this out in the real world. So I would encourage people not only to work in whatever ways you can to build that consensus, but find ways to reach out to these folks. They are very passionate. They will try to find ways to see that you are able to be a part of this movement.
Wow, that's inspiring stuff. Thank you very much, Mr. Shumaker and Ben Zion. I totally agree. People Unlimited and Life Extension, the two founders of RadFest, obviously the premier Radical Life Extension, sort of convention going on there in the United States, and I really want to attend one, and I hope. My hope for RadFest in the next decade is sort of a franchise model where we can expand this to different parts of the United States, where we can have more conferences and we can go international, whether that be Canada, Australia, New Zealand, or throughout Europe, and maybe even in a different language. Jose Cadero, could help us with some Spanish. We've got some friends down there in Bolivia. We can go international. I think Spanish is also something that we're looking down the barrel of the next decade as a big thing. I've got some people. I forgot to mention. I will mention this at the end. Thank you very much, Rebecca, for coming, and she's doing a documentary on Detonation. Actually, she's filming an entire documentary. She's been around here filming, so thank you very much to her. I should have said that at the start. I forgot, but yeah, we're looking at getting Detonation and some of these other ones translated into Spanish, and I think that's interesting as well, because Spanish is such a big population, the Spanish-speaking, Espanol-speaking population of the world. It's such a big one, and it's in very important parts of the world. And there's a lot of money and a lot of people, and a lot of good people who speak Spanish, and we don't want to leave them out either. So if we can do that in the next decade as well, with some of these translation technologies that are emerging all around the place, I think that'll be good as well. So I'd like to see RadFest in Spain if we can, or RadFest Latin, down there in South America. If we can. That's a decade-long project. But all these super longevity conferences, parties and stuff, I think this is good. And I think that's kind of interesting with the political party idea that Zoltan Itz founded, is that it's created a good mechanism, because politics is simultaneously very, very hard to do and very, very easy. It's quite easy in a developed democracy to just sort of get a party sort of started and sitting there. There's certain requirements to a legal founded party. 500 members here in Australia, or I'm not sure what they are in the United States or Canada. I don't think it's as stringent, but you can create these mechanisms as a rallying point quite easily. But I think conferencing and networking in this sort of way is going to be more beneficial, because the speakers, such as we're talking about, Ed Parks, Johnny Adams, Greg Faber, we've got a lot more. Aubrey de Gay, all the academics can emerge from the laboratories and teach us about all these great technologies that are coming down the pipeline. And I'm really interested. We want to get to nanobots. We want to repair our bodies. We want to have augmentations starting to come along, and knowing which augmentations are good. We want to know embellishing, adding a permanent or semi-permanent external change to the body. We want to have boosting. I mean, why
Transvision 2020 in Los Angeles. So yet another great event happening. And then there is a Transvision also going on in Europe, and I apologize for not knowing when and where that's going to be.
Yes, I think it might be in Amsterdam, and at around that same time. Yes, and we should the one in Los Angeles in September will be at USC. And Humanity Plus and other organizers have been working very diligently at putting that together. And we should also thank those folks and all of Humanity Plus, and also the folks of the organizers of RadFest and People Unlimited for putting together this longevity seminar that we were lucky enough to attend. Even though there's some incredibly influential people in the world of emerging biomedicine at this, the cost of attending is quite low, and that's a nice thing to encourage folks to be able to attend and have a nice time. And we really all did, I think, have quite a wonderful time.
And of course, David Kekich's Maximum Life Foundation was very instrumental in making this happen, and we certainly want to make sure that they're mentioned.
Yes, and especially David allowing us all to participate and being so kind as to allow me to present on this subject that's so near and dear to my heart.
Am I, you guys can hear me, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, I don't know what happened on the internet. It's just playing up. But yeah, cool. Yeah, and I just want to note that that's an interesting comment there about the price point. Yeah, that's good. I mean, there has been people who've criticized some singularity events being a little too pricey for people to attend, on a regular basis. But I think that's an artificial barrier to keep certain people, in and out. But look, I think different price points all over the place. I think that would be a good competitive market. You can have cheaper price points for different events and higher price points for higher quality events. I think maybe we're coming to the end of the high price points for higher quality events, and we'll see a mix, a diversity of price points as well. And I think that's what I want to see. If people, regular people, want to spend a certain percentage of their income on going to these events, I don't think they should have to, take out a mortgage to do it. But at the same time, the higher quality events should be allowed to continue on, to stimulate that sort of efficiency that encourages, and I think that's really important as well. So I think a diversity of price points coming over the next decade is really important. From very low to very high, I think that's a great idea as well. So on the political front as well, Ben Zion, what else is happening in your? If we're done, are we done with? Is that it for events?
Sure.
Yeah, I think so.
I'll just add an additional comment that I think it's a wonderful time in these 2020s that are beginning in a few weeks, that we'll see a proliferation of such events. So it won't only be that we'll see a greater variety, but a larger number of folks organizing and taking an interest in this as these things are really fleshed out in the marketplace and become a part of our ordinary life. And that's a truly exciting prospect. Yes, we also did want to talk a little bit about the Futurist New Deal and our Pentagon policy platforms.
Yeah. So with the Futurist New Deal and the Ben Zion 2020 campaign, what we're thinking about doing here at Detonation is having a theme week for the Ben Zion 2020 campaign, where every week up until the election, we'll cover a new aspect of either Futurist New Deal or something that's happening in the news cycle, and how transhumanism and the Ben Zion 2020 campaign will respond to that news item, battling with Republicans and Democrats and putting money, where it's needed. If there's a forest fire in California, what would the Ben Zion 2020 campaign do versus what the Republicans and Democrats are promising, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope you would like to do that, Ben. I think a theme week would be a different policy theme week. Would what do you think about that, Ben?
Oh yes. You and I discussed this before, and I'm very excited about this prospect. And to some degree, we've had regular updates on various policy approaches and these policy plank shows fairly routinely on Detonation. And I'd like to make that a more regular feature. I think that would be a wonderful step. Very
cool. All right, cool. Yeah, so Futurist New Deal, tell us all about it. Tell us what you wanted to highlight us on this FND military policy.
Well, yes. As most of our listeners are aware, and certainly we have discussed before on this program, David Shumaker is our military advisor for the Futurist New Deal for America, and he's done some incredible work. And we've had a chance to have many discussions and poring over notes and documents in looking at these materials. So I would like to give the floor to him so that he can lay out this picture of what the Futurist New Deal military set of policies would look like.
Fantastic.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ben. And let me say just a little bit about myself as we go. I have 25 years in the U.S. military in a variety of different roles. And I was fortunate in that regard, and the fact that it gives me, I think, a fairly broad look. And then I grew up in a military family, and I love military history. So, some of this was something that had gone on for a long time. Now, when I got involved in transhumanism, I started looking at, of course, the platform for the U.S. Transhumanist-Party, and then Ben and I have had these discussions. And usually one of the first things that comes up when I start talking to people about the military and the political light is military budget. Military budget is huge, especially in the United States. And I remember back in the primary when we had, 9 candidates at one time, and that was typically a discussion point, and some of those were very interested in taking and putting this money off into other areas, and that's, a nice thing to do as far as being able to try to direct it into transhumanism. But I'd like to point out that to some degree, that has been going on for a while, and maybe we haven't recognized that. I just did a quick Google search and looked for things that that were developed in or for the military and are now in civil society that we as transhumanists would have a hard time living without. So, a couple of them. The internet that we're using today, for example, started out as a program to tie research centers together back during the period of the Soviet and U.S. nuclear standoff. We can see that once that threat was passed and it could be opened up to regular colleges and universities, not just the research ones, and then out into standard life, it spread quickly around the globe, and I could not imagine going back from that. Trying to drive to get across town here in Phoenix, sometimes I don't think I could do that without the GPS that's in my car. Now, I was in the military in the early 90s as we were getting ready for the first Gulf War, and we had these new boxes that were given to us. There was one given to each one of the maneuver units that I worked with, and they were about the size of a pretty good sized briefcase. And they had this weird looking paddle on top, and I asked what that's for, and they said, well, this allows us to talk to X number of satellites in orbit and be able to determine our exact position. GPS. So it was kind of like the analogy going to, the first cell phone. They were big and bulky and, had limited availability. But I'll tell you what, that first Gulf War, we're so used to navigating with topographical maps. And as you're probably aware, elevation changes on a topographical map are variations in color on the map. And you can use that to identify where you're going and landmarks and so forth. In Iraq, it was one color. because there was not much variation of anything. And without the GPSs, we would have been very hard pressed in ground maneuver units to be able to coordinate exactly where we were. Well, that definitely was a military function. And now it's out in civilian society to where everybody has it on their phone in the form of Google Maps or Apple Maps or something along that line. And then just general computer hardware, warming up your coffee in the microwave oven. So what I'm pointing out here is, and then we could go back 100 years, 200 years, 500 years into military history and point out various things that had their origins in the military and moved then on into civil society. The thing is I think what's different now is everything is moving at such a fast rate. I think we as transhumanists need to be, yes, wanting to redirect money to go to projects that we would like that to do. We don't need to back off from that, but we also need to be very focused on technologies that we see that are going on that we can use to our mutual benefit. I think a really good one is, we'll probably talk a little bit about the soldier of the future. There's been much written on that and different videos and so forth that are out there. But one of the things that really, I look at that is the exoskeleton part of this that allows you to have much greater strength and be able to move. Well, that's wonderful. But what about someone that doesn't have the strength to walk at all? Imagine being able to take that and provide an exoskeleton to somebody so that they can do the things, Steele, that you and I consider to just be normal and routine, but that would be so liberating to them. Mm-hmm. So definitely part of the future New Deal is we want to direct money in places where we would like to see it go, but we also want to be able to take what we've got and use it effectively, because sometimes being a partner and steering things in the direction that we want is a lot easier than trying to start from the ground up on something. Ben, did you have something to add to that?
Oh, no, just that, well, just as a quick aside, that there's been a story recently in some news magazines that described that sort of technology, this exoskeleton for specifically for people with some sort of physical impairment, being used more and more routinely in Japan by older workers. Older workers are able to continue doing their work if it has some physical element to it by using these exoskeletons, which tends to give them more upper body strength. At present, these exoskeletons are more functional for the arms than they are for the legs, so to speak. And I was did a show a few weeks ago on the Rundown Live where Steele was there. We spoke to a guy named Scotty Lopez, who has a condition where his limbs did not form as fully as he would have liked. He's very excited about this prospect of being able to use a more realized exoskeleton. It would be very nice to give him that mobility that he has been lacking in that particular area. And this is something that Zoltan Isfin has talked about in other contexts. For example, using municipal funds that are being spent in other ways for handicap access, to give handicapped folks this full access in the form of giving them these kind of transhumanist technologies. And, you know, I'm also reminded of what Zoltan said on this subject more broadly as to our United States military. And going back to the founding of this organization, the United States Transhumanist-Party in 2015, even at that time, Zoltan was already talking quite a lot about a science industrial complex as opposed to a military industrial complex. But I think it does bear repeating that in many respects, as David has pointed out, we've always had this sort of science industrial complex. But we do want to see that those 20% of federal funds, that is public monies, that are spent on defense are well spent, and maybe even finding ways to see that some of those funds are being put towards personnel and citizens as well.
Yeah, so military technology is really interesting because it's simultaneously the best and worst of humans, what we can create and produce. We throw our best minds into enhancing military capabilities throughout history. It's always been sort of where all the resources sort of end up. After you get civilization, you get luxury goods, and if you have a few, and then you end up with the spin-off of that being the military to defend, and they always get the front runner. They're always the front runner on the latest technologies, whether they be, mind technologies, or physical technologies, swords and shields, or we're talking about exoskeletons. So it's been simultaneously a huge driver of innovation, the competitive mechanism between nation states, where different nation states are always coming up with innovations to defeat the rival states. If you're stuck behind a big castle, why not throw some pigs over there to give them disease? I mean, that's an innovation, right? Walls but it's simultaneously the worst, because it's a destructive end. There's a destructive end, and they call it, in the United States, they call it the defense force, right? It's usually this idea of defense, but even Donald Trump, even in the last few days, I've been watching a lot of Donald Trump with impeachment proceedings on the horizon, and he says he's been talking about the Space Force, and he says forget defense. This is an offensive capability. He used the word offense, so. Woo, okay, cool. But speaking about exoskeletons and cyborgs as well, Mr. John Kurtz enhancements that are around the corner without even thinking about, any of the pain that comes with the you really need with these military guys is you need a set of true ethical parameters to guide them. Obviously, there needs to be some secrets and some conditions against rival nation states. That's just the way the world works. There is a lot of room there for super competitive stuff to spill over. And Mr. Shumaker, you exhibited a few different technologies: the GPS, ARPANET, the internet, and a few other different devices and technologies, computers in general. Actually, the Turing invented the computer basically to hunt Nazi submarines, right? I mean, it was a Nazi submarine hunter. It was there to crack the code, the Enigma code, or whatever it was, that crazy German coding machine. So, so military technologies are simultaneously the best and the worst of what we can do. It's an unfortunate reality, but if with correct parameters, the spillover effects can be absolutely massive, huge, and have massive societal, economic, political impacts.
Well, competition between nation states, as you say, I think is what really focuses us on the best and the worst. I mean, we being people, not just the United States, we want to make sure that we're safe from somebody else that is an unknown quantity or something that we're not certain about. Maybe there are those that take a more ominous view and they want military power so they can take what they want. There's plenty of examples of that in history. But I tell you, looking at NASA, looking at the space program, looking at the International Space Station. I was fortunate to get to meet that astronaut that had been up there a couple of times, and her talking about working with the Russians and working with various other nations. And I like to watch the NASA channel, which is available worldwide too, and I'll watch the different astronauts being interviewed and what's going on. And the reason I like that is that international flavor. Where I'm going with this is many of the astronauts, especially in the early days, were all military members. Okay, so they had the military training, they had military training in aircraft or whatever, things that prepared them for the rigors of space flight. Now today we have scientists and engineers in orbit, and we have people that are coming from a great many nations to work together. And I think this is a possible example of what we can do in the future, even military-wise. Sure, we want to maintain a particular edge, and somebody else wants to maintain a particular edge, but when you're working with people towards common goals, you're working in something that's very expensive like space. There's an economic impact as far as wanting to be able to work together. I would love to be able to see some of this spill over into the general military area. And I did hear your comments about the U.S. Space Force from Trump, and we'll wait and see what happens there. But there'll always be a military aspect to probably about anything that we do. I'm hoping that it can change in character as far as military people understand each other when we work together from different nations. I've done that back in my military days. And maybe that can lead us to doing more of the best for human nature and maybe a little less of the not so good for the human nature.
You make a great point there, because you've enlightened the world on what has to happen, and what has to happen is what you've said, is you have to have a big enough vision and a big enough dream and a big enough goal, and you can unite humans to accomplish different tasks. If it's hard enough and it's big enough, you can focus those energies into something. And the International Space Station is no it's no easy feat, right? I mean, this is a very highly complex machine that takes a lot of innovation, thinking, coordination, cooperation between different nation states. I remember they were stuck up there for, a couple of months while they were waiting for supplies, and the American rocket failed, the Russian rocket failed, and then finally the Japanese rocket, it got there, it delivered the supplies to the International Space Station, and everyone from all three countries were cheering. No one was being, so science and a vision is one of these great uniters. And, we're coming up on the emergent age is now, the information age is well behind us now, but, coming up on the singularity, we're looking at, we need that same vision. We need that same international cooperative spirit in order to get the singularity right. We need data centers across the world with that same vision of the International Space Station, of colonizing Mars, of building Dyson spheres, of harnessing the sun's energy, of exploring the cosmos. We need that same international vision to get these AI problems sorted out. These AI problems, because, this is the other thing. You're looking at it, you're staring down the barrel of a gun of a techno-Luddite, revolution. They're gonna rise up if we don't get this right. And I don't think anyone here on this panel advocates for, a worldwide ban on AI. So in other words, we have one shot to get AI right, and we have to have that same cooperation, that same vision that the International Space Station had, that the Mars mission had, that the harnessing of of exploring the oceans. That's another one that we haven't yet done. And I remember that woman that famous scientist lady who you met. She was an Aquanaut as well. You have to have that vision, right? It's a space and under, but. I think that getting these data centers on an international footing with the same sort of vision is imperative.
Yes, absolutely right. And that's something that I think that we as transhumanists can get out there and talk about, because we're the ones that are talking about the singularity. We're the ones that's talking about a national health plan for everyone so that we can implement the good effects of these technologies as they come along. And we need to have honest discussions about the things that can go wrong as well.
Absolutely. Ben Zion, what do you think?
Well, yes. We do want to be developing all manner of new projects in conjunction with these public-private partnerships. And this, at the same time, we do want to have some ordering of importance there, and a sense of accountability as to what's being done with public funds. This was something of those 9 folks that you mentioned in our primary election from a few months ago, something that they all agreed on, was that accountability. These people had very diverse set of opinions, but they agreed that accountability and that good use of these public resources should be at the top of everyone's list. But in thinking about this idea of the military as a great incubator of emerging technology, and it truly is, even the International Space Station project that you mentioned, which was extremely expensive,
Yes.
did continue to develop many of those new technologies. Our friend Thomas O'Carroll, who's a commenter on this video, and actually will be doing a show with us about emerging technology in 6 days' time. That show will be about particularly augmented reality and virtual reality interfaces being used developed by a company named Ninja Theory for the purposes of mental health, having people allowing people to have more insights into the functioning of their mind and their own health and well-being in that context through the use of advanced algorithms and interfaces. But Thomas O'Carroll asked an interesting question to Mr. Shumaker, but I'll take a moment and answer it as well. What does Mr. Shumaker believe is the next military tech that will cross over to the public? And
wow.
We talked about this in the context of a few things in the 20th century, the mid to late 20th century, integrated computing systems, network technology, GPS, all of the things that are allowing us to have these conversations on our smartphones and desktops. They were very much developed through this kind of incubation. And actually, I do think that a smaller and smaller augmented reality technology will be increasingly a bigger part of our lives. One of the things that DARPA has been developing for about 20 years is contact lenses that function much in the same way that Google Glass or Microsoft HoloLens are functioning, but smaller still, wholly invisible. And those prototypes do already exist. And I think that things of this kind, whether they be so internal as a contact lens or simply smaller glasses and lenses, will become an important part of the marketplace that derives directly from this military-industrial incubation series of methods. What do you think, David, will be the next military tech that will cross over?
Well, you know, I'm pretty sure that whatever I say will be wrong, and I'll tell you why. Because I didn't see GPS coming. I didn't see the internet coming. All these things had very inauspicious beginnings, at least out in the general area of the military where I was at. Once they were given to us and we started to use them, though, they became extremely important. Now, having said that, I think it probably will be something in perhaps areas of very narrow artificial intelligence, maybe not general artificial intelligence. I think we're seeing more of those built into different systems. The weapon systems, the autonomous weapon systems are getting a lot of news play and so forth, but perhaps it will be something that is narrow that we're not seeing that will be upon us before we know it. So we could all make some different guesses. I like the things that you brought up, Ben, but as far as being able to accurately predict something, I think that's pretty hard. Yeah.
I'm looking at clothes. I think there'll be a lot of innovation in clothes. I think sturdier, lighter fabrics. Maybe these bulletproof vests or something. Camouflage clothes that might be used in art and in entertainment. I think augmented reality is going to either spill over or be developed, to assist the military or assist. But I think augmented reality is definitely on its way, and holograms as well. I think because the military is always looking at ways to reduce costs, and it's probably once the military figures out it can do virtual conferences. If you read any sci-fi or play any sci-fi game or whatever, it's always hologram conferences. I think that's something that the military will attach itself to and probably come up with a whole new revelation, whether that be an augmented reality or something else. I don't know. I agree with you, Mr. Shumaker. There's always something that happens and then boom, it's so much bigger than anyone could have envisaged. And it's probably right in front of our faces. I'm really not sure.
I think you're right. And maybe it'll be robotics. That's another one too. I mean, robotics itself has been around for some time, but we've now seen the demonstration of a robotic soldier, and we've seen some other things. So coupling that with advances in AI and just general materials improvements and so forth, maybe robotics will be that as well. So it'll be really interesting to see what it is.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting with robotics. Domestic house servants is something I'm excited about. Absolutely, I think it'll relieve a lot of time. Like Andrew Yang talks about the calculation factor of labor and the fact that you don't factor billions and trillions of hours of home work, into the GDP factor or labor of this kind into any sort of metric. But hopefully we'll just be able to eliminate that so that people can go and do more higher productive functions. That would be a good spillover event. What do you reckon, Ben? What's your money on?
Oh yeah, no, that's a very, very big, a very, very, very big development. We could spend an entire hour talking about troubling implications of autonomous weapon systems, killer robots, so to speak. We could talk an awful lot just about the Boston Dynamics demonstration of such a machine. But the flip side, and perhaps more consequential to people's ordinary lives of autonomous weapon systems, would be something like you've both just described, autonomous work systems. That would add a tremendous amount of work product to people's lives and to the marketplace that does not derive from human labor. And this has incredible implications for how you live at home, how you start businesses, how you otherwise operate in the workplace. These are all important discussions to be having. We, of course, here at the Futurist New Deal for America, we have gone on record repeatedly saying that we are against killer robots. It's down in the corner of your screen, the campaign to stop killer robots. But these autonomous systems generally have implications far beyond this specific usage. And we should be having those discussions. Anything that adds many, many, many trillions of dollars of value to the marketplace has serious implications for citizens and for workers. And my feeling is that as we see these things occurring, we will see a great increase in the quality of life of human beings as a result. We will see people's work lives becoming better. We will see people becoming entrepreneurs in ways that, in numbers that they are not today. All of this stems from these new emerging technologies, and certainly this type of robotic autonomy is an important subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And China is projected to going away from the military aspect just a little bit, but you can bring this back if you want. China is projected to, by 2050, supplant America's investment in R&D. That's a projection I was reading over at CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations. They're projecting that China will outpace America's F&D development. And I think that's a tragedy. I think that's a tragedy for the United States. I think the United States is much better than that. And you can either take out some of that military budget and shift it back into R&D, or you could just you can merge the figures, or maybe. But I think it's a tragedy that such a powerhouse of innovation like the United States is being challenged on this level when they have so much money to invest in R&D, and they're not taking that seriously. But anyway, I think we've run out of time. My little counter got messed up before when I sort of blopped in and out, but I think we're out of time. Is there anything you would like to wrap up on? Start with you, Mr. Shumaker. Thank you so much for coming on this episode of Detonation. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor, and thanks for bringing the DC-9 as always.
3.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. What would you like to say? I think we're wrapping up.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, and thanks for the discussion as far as military is concerned. I think we can perhaps have some additional military discussions. And going by your theme of the week, maybe if you have a military week or something along that line, we'll pick various military topics and go in and take a look at them and take a look at what ramifications to transhumanism there are. And I think that might be of interest to your audience. However, thanks today for being able to talk about maybe synergy. I'd like to take a look at bringing things together. So happy to talk about how the International Space Station can be an example of cooperation, and including cooperation among the military. And I found it very interesting, your talks about the R&D budgets, and I'd like to take a look at that in light sometime and compare that with the different civilian budgets and so forth that are being included. I don't know if those were in your numbers or not, but I'm thinking, look at the work that Tesla's doing and SpaceX and Google, and it's probably pretty hard to get an idea what those numbers are. So maybe we have a discussion on that sometime. But as always, I enjoy the conversations here and I enjoy your moderation. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shumaker. That's really, really promising. I am looking those numbers up for you right now. But Ben, what were you going to say on your way out the door?
Oh, yes. Well, I thought I would take a moment and call back what David called back, your discussion of China outpacing the United States in terms of research and development by 2050. And culturally, China and even other countries have already outpaced us. We, in the futurist community, sometimes we like to think that the United States has as great of an interest generally, the citizens have as great of an interest generally in futurism as we do, but that's not the case. Anti-science sentiments and a general lack of interest and malaise on these subjects is quite commonplace, even epidemic in this country. So in some ways, China and other countries have already outpaced us just in terms of basic interest in emerging technology and working on those things. I'm reminded also of a few weeks ago how, in an unprecedented statement, a Chinese Premier Xi Jinping made comments in favor of blockchain technology, made a number of statements about using, quote, digital finance and other applications of blockchain, the kinds of things we've talked about, broader pushes for e-governance. And that, of course, has interesting implications for China and the world. But it should stand also as a cautionary tale to our country that if we are not at the cutting edge of adopting these things, we run the very real risk of falling behind. And that has great cost to the marketplace. That has a great cost to human development and quality of life. We cannot allow that to be the case. We must remain at the forefront of these emerging technologies. And that is something that I believe the Futurist New Deal for America has at the center of its mandate. And I hope that you will take a moment and look at my website, benzion2020.com. Also visit transhumanist-party.org and have a look at all of these writings on these two websites and make your own determination. We do have some exciting things going up in the world of the Transhumanist Party as well. For around the time of January 1st. So please stay tuned, and we'll be doing lots of more exciting shows and producing more material for you. I have some upcoming events. I'm calling into a meeting with some friends in New York, the Biohackers Group, to talk a little bit about our de-extinction program that we're working on, a conservation program that we're working on closely with those guys and others. So a lot of exciting things coming up. Also, remember to stay tuned as we are releasing more materials for my upcoming Guinness record to set the record for augmented reality, a continuous augmented reality immersion, also coming up in Q1 of 2020. So a lot of really exciting things happening in coming months. Please do stay tuned to Detonation and the United States Transhumanist Party, your home for futurism.
Thank you for the kind words, Benzion. Yes, 2020 is looking to be a great decade, and I did bring up those those stats. So let me just quickly go through this, because I actually do want to do a whole 2020 show. Anybody can come on for that one. And also thanks to everybody who sent me emails as well. So many people sent me emails saying, where are you? And thank you for that. But this is research and development race. This is the CFR visualizing 2020 trends. China projected to outspend US in R&D by 2040. They're projecting by 2040 that the United States will spend 1.32 trillion, whereas China will then spend 1.62 trillion. So that's interesting. So the text here says China is investing enormous resources to develop the next generation of critical technologies, and it's well on its way to becoming the world's largest spender on research and development. Beijing's sprint to become an innovation superpower could help drive global growth and prosperity, but also threatens U.S. economic competitiveness and national security. It's not too late, however, for leaders in Washington to take remedial action and to dedicate more funding to the basic research that is too expensive and too risky for the private sector. The United States still leads the world in total R&D spending, and it could remain competitive if the government restores investments to this area to prior levels, boosting the federal R&D spending to its historical average about 1% of gross domestic product, some 230 billion, could ignite the type of discoveries that have reshaped and revitalized the U.S. economy. And I'm telling you, if you vote USTP, if you vote Benzone 2020 or Zoltan Itzvan, you're not looking at 1%. You're looking at, I can't quote you, I don't know, but you're looking at marginally more than 1%. So I think the United States would be on a good footing in that realm, in that strategy. But thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming on the show. We will do a 2020 Trends to Watch show. I think that 2020 is going to be a big year for transhumanism. We've got the media, we've got the politics, we're getting Radfest, we're getting these festivals, we're starting to get interconnected. The ideas are flowing, everything's happening. So I'm really, really excited. Thank you, everybody, for coming on. Thanks for the emails. Find me on LinkedIn. That's it. That's another show. Thank you, everybody. You're all the best. I love you all. And if you want to see more detonation, just because I've been on Facebook, I don't really know. So hit the like button if you do like this episode, so I can get a sort of indicator of how much sort of demand there is for this style of show. So smash that like button. Thank you very much, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you really, really soon. That's it, Mr. Shumaker, Benzone 2020. As always, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thanks, fellas.